We accept the man as a citizen without any knowledge of his fitness, and he assumes the duties of citizenship without any knowledge as to what they are. The privileges of American citizenship are so great, its duties so grave, that we may well insist upon good knowledge of every person applying for citizenship, and a good knowledge by him of our institutions. We should not cease to be hospitable to immigration, but we should cease to be careless as to the character of it. There are men of all races, even the best, whose coming is necessarily a burden upon our public revenues or a threat to our social order, and these should be identified and excluded. President Benjamin Harrison, Inaugural Address, 4th of March, 1889. Ta-da!
From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we toil in the vineyard of historical perspective so that you can drink the sweet, sweet nectar of erudition. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. So glad you could join us this evening. And yes, you do get intellectual bonus points for watching us instead of some silly sports ball game that, according to rumor, is all evidence and presumed moral authority anyway, which is a recipe that has never once in the entire recorded history of human intellectual gastronomy produced a main course that anybody in their right mind would wish to consume. Immigration is one of those issues where the public memory seems to reset roughly once every election cycle, as though the United States simply burst into existence in its current demographic configuration sometime during the Carter administration, and any proposed deviation from the present arrangement must therefore be rooted in either malice or ignorance. That assumption is false. America has always had immigration, but America has never had this immigration, not in scale, not in permanence, not in structure, and not in the accompanying insistence that asking questions about it is, in and of itself, an indictment of the questioner's moral character. So tonight, in the enduring interest of the public mental hygiene, we will do what we always endeavor to do on this program: slow down the tape, widen the aperture, and take a look at how immigration has actually worked for most of American history, not as a moral parable, not as an aspirational exercise based on feelings and emotions, but as a guided set of principles, traditionally at least, with limits, pauses, expectations, and consequences. There will be no demonization here, even when it might be warranted. There will be no sanctification here, even when it gives us warm, fuzzy feelings in our tum-tum. What there will be are numbers, norms, verifiable facts about the historical record, and even the occasional uncomfortable comparison that some bleating buffoons who prefer that we never think deeply about matters of great nuance and complexity would prefer that we don't make. So please securely fasten your safety harnesses and keep any dangling appendages inside the vehicle at all times. There are no helicopters and Humvees this week, but there are steamships, quotas, exclusion acts, and at least one moment where nostalgia proves less stupid than modern certainty. Episode 1, 1607 to 1776. Settlement is not immigration. Before we can talk about immigration, we must first dispose of a category error that poisons nearly every modern discussion of this subject. And the error is this: early America was not built by immigrants in the modern sense. It was built by settlers. That distinction is one that matters, and it matters a very great deal. The people who arrived at Jamestown and Plymouth and the other early 17th century colonies were not entering a stable, sovereign nation state with a labor market and a welfare apparatus and a legal identity already in place. They were founding societies from scratch, often badly, sometimes fatally. Your host's own paternal ancestors arrived with the third supply to Jamestown in 1609, a voyage so catastrophic that history remembers the following winter as the starving time. And that starvation was your reward for being lucky enough to be on one of the 7 vessels that actually arrived at the destination, and not the one that got shipwrecked in Bermuda or the one that was lost at sea without a trace. Which is to say, this was not an Ellis Island welcome center. This was try not to die of malnourishment or dysentery while attempting to invent a country. Settlement required total assimilation because there was nothing to be multicultural with. There was one language, one legal system, one political culture, and survival depended on adopting all of it immediately. No one arrived demanding accommodation, no one arrived expecting support, and no one arrived with the option of remaining culturally separate for generations on end. The early colonies were harsh, exclusionary, and unapologetically selective, not out of cruelty, but of necessity. A weak society cannot absorb unlimited difference. If it tries, it collapses. That principle does not vanish with time. It merely becomes unfashionable to mention it. Episode 2, 1776 to 1840. A republic opens the door carefully. After independence, the United States did become a nation capable of receiving immigrants, but it did so cautiously, with an eye toward cohesion rather than sentiment. Early immigration policy was almost aggressively boring. There were no mass intakes, there was no permanent entitlement to entry, and crucially, there was no blanket assumption that everyone who arrived would be allowed to stay, and no one suggested that there ought to be. Naturalization took time, political rights took longer, and the expectation was clear. Newcomers would adopt the language, laws, and civic habits of the Republic, not negotiate with them, not express hostility and contempt toward them, and not sneeringly dismiss them as being inferior to what existed in the place they voluntarily emigrated from to begin with. It's the most basic, most elemental part of the immigration compact, but today it's been almost completely discarded. When you go to a new country, the onus is on you to fit in with the way they do things. To put it in the simplest of metaphorical terms, when you are a guest in someone else's home, you don't get to complain about the interior decor. Immigration levels rose and fell organically over the years, commensurate with the demands of the labor market and the exigencies of economic expansion. When the country needed people, it welcomed them. When it didn't, immigration slowed, sometimes dramatically, sometimes completely. And no one of any political stripe considered this in any way controversial. The idea that a nation might pause immigration to consolidate its population, stabilize wages, or absorb previous arrivals was considered common sense, not cruelty, not xenophobia, not a moral emergency. Immigration was understood as a privilege extended by a sovereign people, not a human right enforceable against them. This understanding will persist remarkably intact for well over a century. Episode 3, 1840 to 1914, Ellis Island and the Myth of the Open Door. This is the period that is most often invoked and most often wildly misunderstood. Yes, immigration numbers were high. Yes, millions arrived. And yes, America absorbed them because it filtered them. Ellis Island was not a welcome mat, it was a sieve. Between 20% and in some years as many as 50% of arriving passengers were rejected and sent back, often at the steamship company's expense. Why? Because the rules were blunt and they were unapologetic. If you were sick, you didn't get in. If you were disabled, you didn't get in. If you could not plausibly support yourself through labor, you didn't get in. If you became a public charge, you could, and most likely would, be deported. There was no social safety net. There were no entitlement programs. There certainly was no concept of importing entire extended families with the expectation of permanent public support. Immigration was tolerated, even encouraged, precisely because it was conditional. And most crucially of all, assimilation was non-negotiable. Your great-great-grandparents arriving from Norway in the 1880s, as this reporter's maternal great-great-grandparents did not arrive as something called Norwegian Americans. They arrived as Norwegians who were expected immediately to engage themselves in the work of becoming Americans. They understood the expectation and they abided by it without resentment or complaint. They learned to like the things the Americans liked. Why? Well, do you remember the old saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do? There is a reason that axiom has existed for 2.5 millennia, because it's a wise and useful bit of advice. They learned English. They adopted American civic norms. They participated in American institutions. They retained their cultural memory, culinary preferences, old world folk tales, religious predilections, and what have you, but they did so privately, not as a rival identity. That is what the melting pot looks like. We call it the melting pot precisely because it melts. Episode 4, 1882 to 1924, limits, exclusions, and a nation says, that's enough for now. As industrialization accelerated, immigration surged, and with it came social strain, wage pressure, and political backlash. The response was not hysteria, it was legislation. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was ugly, discriminatory, and morally compromised, and it also reflected a broad consensus that immigration policy existed to protect social cohesion and labor stability, not anyone's abstract ideals or emotional peccadillos. The same logic produced literacy tests, health requirements, and eventually national origin quotas, the sort of things over which we've been conditioned to gasp and clutch our pearls in the present day, but which, again, were not remotely controversial in a country where there was common, nearly universal assent to the notion that immigration exists primarily for the benefit of the nation, and whatever benefits redound to individual immigrants and their descendants are a function of them living up to their end of the bargain by being productive, engaged, well-behaving members of the society they have been allowed to join. And here is the key point that the modern discourse often refuses to acknowledge. These policies were bipartisan, they were popular, and they worked. From 1924 onward, immigration dropped sharply, wages rose, assimilation accelerated, ethnic enclaves thinned out, and the country digested what it had already taken in. This was not seen as a betrayal of American values, it was seen correctly as responsible stewardship. No serious person believed immigration should be infinite. No serious person believed assimilation was optional. And no serious person believed demographic transformation was a cost-free proposition. That consensus will hold largely unquestioned until the late 20th century. Episode 5, 1965 to 1985, the Quiet Revolution nobody voted for. And here is where everything changes, and drastically does it change, practically overnight. The 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act is often falsely portrayed as a moral correction to earlier acts of alleged discrimination. What it actually did was far more consequential and far less openly debated. It abolished national origin quotas. It introduced family reunification as the primary driver of immigration, and perhaps most pertinently of all, It quietly decoupled immigration levels from labor demand, assimilation capacity, and any semblance of historical precedent. At the time, its proponents, and make no mistake, this is what we would call in our current day parlance a broad bipartisan coalition, assured the public that overall immigration levels would not increase by any significant degree. Needless to say, they were wrong. Spectacularly wrong, in fact. Or alternatively, they were all a bunch of damned liars. What followed was the invention of a brand new societal norm that was never put to voters at the ballot box. Permanent, high volume, 7-figure immigration every single year, indefinitely. No pauses, no digestion periods, no meaningful assimilation enforcement, and eventually no expectation that newcomers would adopt the dominant culture at all. This was not in any respect the historical American model. It was another thing entirely. It was a top-down social engineering experiment, conducted without public consent and justified retroactively by brute force moral intimidation and public shaming of anyone who was unwise enough to start asking questions about its wisdom and its utility. And once set in motion, it proved very difficult to stop. Episode 6, The Melting Pot versus Multiculturalism, two very different animals. At this point, it becomes necessary to address the distinction that modern discourse does everything in its power to blur beyond recognition. The melting pot and multiculturalism are not synonyms. They are not even adjacent concepts. They are, as a practical matter, opposing social theories. The melting pot is premised on convergence. It assumes a dominant civic culture into which newcomers are expected to integrate, not to erase their past, not to abandon private traditions, not to forfeit cultural memory, but to adopt a shared public identity, because a coherent and cohesive society, in order to be that, demands that they must. Multiculturalism rejects this premise entirely, and proudly does it do so. It says, move to a new country and make no personal concessions whatever. Do not learn the language. Do not adopt the norms. Do not subordinate your prior identity to the civic culture that you have joined. Instead, import the old country wholesale and expect, even demand, that the host society adapt to you. If and when it declines to do so, start shrieking about racism and xenophobia. The result is not diversity, it is fragmentation. A melting pot produces a coherent culture with internal variation. Multiculturalism produces parallel societies that increasingly view one another with suspicion, resentment, or outright hostility. And here is the crucial historical point. America was not built as a multicultural society. It was built as a pluralistic one, which is a different thing altogether. Pluralism assumes and expects and welcomes and encourages disagreement within a commonly shared framework. Multiculturalism dismantles the framework itself, then pours gasoline on its remains, and then lights them on fire. No nation survives that indefinitely. In fact, if you're looking for the quickest route to societal atomization and the doom spiral toward failed nationhood that invariably accompanies it, you don't need to ask your GPS for directions. Just jump on the multiculturalism highway, and you'll be there before you know it. Episode 7, Chain Migration, the Welfare State, and Perverse Incentives. Now we arrive at a problem our predecessors did not face, because they were serious people and they were wise enough not to create it in the first place. Historically, immigration functioned in a world without a modern welfare state. If you couldn't work, you didn't eat. If you couldn't support yourself, you didn't stay. And nothing about that was xenophobic or immoral or remotely objectionable to any sane person with an IQ above room temperature. The idea that nations should import millions of people with no future potential to be anything but public charges just out of some misguided desire to be benevolent and multicultural is not just inadvisable, it's not just stupid, it is stark raving madness. It's the kind of stark raving madness that turns high functioning societies into failed states. In fact, there's no other possible end result when you start going down that road. The math simply doesn't math, and the numbers do not care about your feelings. If you import hundreds of thousands, even millions, of unproductive, unskilled, non-able-bodied persons year after year after year, your society will fail. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You might be able to delay it somewhat by reducing your native-born population to a condition of ever-increasing penury and destitution, but you cannot permanently forestall a thing that is, by its very nature, unavoidable. The ship is going to hit the iceberg, and it is going to sink. And all the fancy people with all the fancy qualifications and all the fancy degrees will look at each other quizzically and exclaim, "How did this happen?" When immigration was tied to the capacity for self-sufficiency, as it was throughout 80% of American history, it imposed a natural selection pressure that favored the industrious, the adaptable, and the motivated. In other words, precisely the kinds of people that a growing nation wants. Chain migration fundamentally alters that equation, and not in a good way. When immigration policy prioritizes extended family reunification over skills, over labor demand, and over assimilation potential, and combines that with a vast and far too generous social safety net, it severs the connection between immigration and contribution. You are no longer selecting for builders, you are selecting for dependents. This is not a moral judgment about individuals, rather, it is a structural critique of incentives. No system can long endure when it rewards arrival more than integration, presence more than participation, and grievance more than gratitude. The idea that a nation might import millions of people indefinitely, including the elderly, the infirm, and the unskilled, and support them permanently at public expense, would have struck every prior generation of Americans as complete and utter madness, because that's what it is. Episode 8, where America fell short and ought to own it. None of this is meant to suggest that America has always succeeded in living up to her own stated ideals where immigration is concerned. In point of fact, she most assuredly has not. Her failures, when they have occurred, have been manifold and decidedly inglorious. Chinese railroad workers did much of the work in building the backbone of the continent and were then excluded from the full participation which some of them had rightly earned. Braceros labored in American fields for decades and were sent home without the opportunities for permanence that some of them most certainly deserved. And most shamefully of all, European Jews, attempting to flee pogroms and persecution in the years preceding and immediately after the outbreak of the Second World War, were turned away, with only a precious few high-profile exceptions, and many of them, far too many in fact, were thus consigned to deaths that were so horrifying as to strain the imagination of any human being with a functioning conscience. These were moral failures, to be sure. They deserve to be acknowledged. They deserve never to be downplayed or forgotten. But here is the sleight of hand in which modern pro-mass migration rhetoric attempts to engage. It treats historical injustice as a blank check for permanent policy irrationality. Acknowledging past wrongs does not require us to invent new ones. Rectifying injustice does not oblige us to abandon sovereignty. And compassion is not the same thing as willful institutional self-harm. A nation can be humane and selective at the same time. America once was that type of nation. There is no good reason why it cannot be again. Episode 9, Demographics Without Conspiracy. The elephant in the room, quietly noticed. Now we approach the part of the conversation that makes people very, very nervous indeed. So, while we will proceed with care, we will also call things what they are. Across the United States, the Anglosphere, Europe, and much of the developed world, the same pattern has emerged since the beginning of this century. Native birth rates fall below replacement level. The institution of marriage is devalued and falls into decline. Family formation collapses. Home ownership becomes unattainable for young adults. And mass immigration, accordingly, becomes the sole mechanism of population growth. Whether this outcome is intentional, accidental, or emergent is beside the point. Because irrespective of the cause, the result is the same. It's a result that is not conducive to a flourishing society. It creates a reality that nobody in their right mind should regard as being a good thing. Large-scale demographic replacement does not require a sinister cabal of evil men hatching dastardly schemes in smoke-filled rooms. It requires only incentives, in this case, perverse incentives. And incentives, especially perverse ones, have predictable consequences. To note this reality is not to ascribe motive, nor is it to live in the realm of the tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorist. It is merely to observe and acknowledge that a well-documented reality exists. And well-documented realities, rhetorically inconvenient though they may be to certain people who seek to advance certain agendas, do not care about how virtuous anybody feels while ignoring them. Episode 10, What Immigration is For and Who Decides. This brings us to the central question that often lurks, often implied but rarely spoken out loud, beneath every argument about immigration. Whom is this for? Is immigration policy meant to benefit migrants themselves? Is it meant to help the balance sheets of big corporations? Is it meant to confer a permanent electoral advantage upon a certain political party? Is it meant to advance a certain set of abstract global ideals? Or is it meant to benefit the nation as a whole, socially, economically, and culturally? It goes without saying that in the present day, in light of the body of evidence we have before us, the latter answer seems vanishingly unlikely to be the correct one. But for the vast majority of American history, it was the correct answer, and it was an answer that was as obvious as it was uncontroversial. Sure, there were always arguments about how many people we should let in, where they should come from, when to have a moratorium, how long it should be, but there was broad agreement across party lines that the primary beneficiaries of immigration policy are supposed to be the people who already live and work in this country. A sovereign people decide who may join them, on what terms, in what numbers, and to what end. They do not do so out of hatred or intolerance, but stewardship, not out of fear, but responsibility. A nation that loses the ability to say enough is not compassionate, it is incoherent and unserious. Epilogue: Immigration and the Obligation to Inherit. America is indeed a nation of immigrants, but more precisely, it is a nation of successfully assimilated immigrants. That success was not accidental. It was structured, it was expected, and it was enforced socially, culturally, and legally. The tragedy of the present moment is not that people want to come here. This has always been true. The tragedy is that we have forgotten what coming here is supposed to mean. A nation is not a hotel. Citizenship is not a subscription service, and identity is not infinitely divisible without consequence. If America is to endure, not merely as an economic zone, but as a people and as a nation, it must recover the courage to say what every functional society has always known. Immigration is not an entitlement. It is not a human right. It is a privilege. The price of the privilege is productivity, assimilation, and good conduct. And sovereignty is non-negotiable. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, well, good. It should make them uncomfortable. Far too many people have spent far too many years living with their heads in the clouds, imagining that residency in the United States is some sort of party favor that we can pass out to anybody in the world who happens to want it. But it is not, and we cannot. So that discomfort, hopefully, is a much needed and long overdue first indication that historical memory and pragmatic rationale are perhaps at last, reasserting themselves. And as we close out this field guide, we would do well to ponder the following questions. What kind of a place do we want to be? Do we want to be a place that's worth living in, or a place where everybody gets to live? We cannot be both. We have to pick one or the other. Do we care about the inheritance that, for some of us, has been passed down by 14 generations of our forebears? Since Jamestown and Plymouth and Popham and Salem and elsewhere, do we want our own descendants 14 generations hence, in the year 2450 or thereabouts, to have access to that same inheritance? Or are we comfortable sacrificing it on the altar of some naive vision of a borderless globalist utopia that is never going to exist? And most importantly, do we have the right to make that choice at all? Is it our place to break the chain of inheritance that connects our ancestors 420 years ago and our future progeny 420 years from now? And if we choose not to break the chain, what should that inheritance look like? Should it look like a coherent, cohesive nation state that cares about its own historic values and traditions and institutions and expects, unashamedly, without apology or equivocation, that new arrivals should do the same? Or should it just look like a flag and a few scraps of old parchment that we don't pay that much attention to anymore because it's passé and unfashionable? And as those questions hang ominously in the air for your consideration, I thank you once again for your kind attention and convey you into the custody of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Tonight, I'm not going to lie to you. We kind of got a one-track mind on this one tonight. We have both become completely enamored with the Knights of the Seven Kingdom. We're probably going to spurg out on it for at least an hour, probably longer. But I'm sure we can find something we dislike about it. Just stick around and we'll see if we can figure it out. Cat.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
I kind of got this weird idea. I'm not sure how well it's going to work, but I want to try to do a sort of a fast-paced question-answer thing right quick. Have you read the books?
Does listening to audiobooks count as reading the
Sure.
books?
Yes.
Then yes.
Okay. Do you have a favorite character from the books?
From the Dunk and Egg novellas, you mean?
Yes.
I do like the Mr. Baratheon, the Laughing Storm.
The Laughing Storm. That is also my favorite character.
Yeah,
Although
yeah,
I will make the statement that in the show, while he is shown to be a stupendous level asshole, they fall a little bit short. He's too charming. While in the books, he's unbelievably charming. He's also a much greater practical joker. I mean, his practical jokes are they're just shy of evil, right? Like,
yes,
I can't remember
you
specifically.
can tell he has more than a little bit of an impish streak to him.
Right, and that's the reason they call him the Laughing Storm. Is on at least one occasion, while literally surrounded by the enemy on a battlefield, he was basically telling your mama jokes while killing them. Tell them
Well,
that
yeah,
they ain't shit.
and just listen to his rationale for participating in the trial of Seven. He says there hasn't been one of these damn things for 100 years. You think I'm going to pass up a chance to bloody up the King's Guard in their fancy white gowns? Hell no!
Right?
I'm in this
And
thing to win it.
Then you add to that the fact that, you know, Duncan, and we'll get back to the beginning. I've got the trailer and everything set up over here so we can go through it step by step. We're just doing a little banner right here. Duncan is probably the least obvious knight there. His only claim to any amount of fame is that no one actually knows how tall he is. There's references
And
in
he
the books.
is, if I'm not mistaken, a little bit shorter in the series than he is in the books. Peter
Right, no,
Clappy is
in the
6'6", if
books.
I'm not mistaken, but Duncan in the books is just short of 7 foot, if I recall
It's
correctly.
closer to 7 than 6 was, I think,
Yeah.
the reference. But here's the thing. Baratheon, the Laughing Storm, was 6'2", 6'3". He's a big boy. That one-eyed guy, I can't remember his name.
Sir Robin, Sir Bravely Bold Sir Robin. That's what I always think of when they say his name. It's damn it, I can't remember his last name, but I know it's Sir Robin something.
Okay. Well, he is a gargantuan man himself. He was one of the larger men on the battlefield and was obvious on the battlefield because of his size. And there's a little meeting between him and Egg.
Robin Riesling.
Right. And in that meeting, three things become at least in the series, three things become immediately obvious. The one-eyed guy, Riesling, we'll call him Sir Robin.
Yes.
Fuck it. Sir Robin knows immediately who Egg is. Says nothing. The reason he knows is because Egg names him not by his colloquial name, but by his honored family name when he sees him out there. And the only people who would, A, know that, and B, do it formally are members of the royal family, and they're the only ones really permitted to do it. So Egg naming him by name reveals I am a Targaryen of some description.
And I feel like we get a small indication of that also from when they first meet Raymond Fossaway. He kind of looks at Egg and there's something in his face that says, I think I've met this kid before, and I'm pretty sure he's not a squire.
Right.
But he just kind of blows it off. And there's a few of those little subtle instances, I think, sprinkled throughout the first couple of episodes.
He doesn't just blow it off. In fact, what he actually does is immediately tie his hitch to this random hedge knight that just walked in with a prince, a dirty
That's
prince.
true. And he has no obvious reason for doing that since he
Right.
is from a he might be just a squire, but he's still from a great house and obviously much higher in station than a lowly hedge knight with a rope belt.
Right. But here's the thing, and you have to kind of read between the lines to get this in both sources, the show and the books. Neither one of them actually frame this out and tell you. It's more of a show, not tell thing. His decision to hitch his horse to Duncan and Egg is based off of the fact that his brother is already attached to the dragon, right? And so
Right.
the crown prince, already has a brother from this family serving him almost directly, but not quite. That becomes directly at the fight of the seven, um, trial of the seven. And so when he sees another prince out in the wild and free, he takes 2 seconds to think this through and go, this could really pay off for the house. And the worst that happens is I lose my head. But he also gets to protect the prince.
You know what question I have that I feel like you're well equipped to answer? I feel like you remember the contents of the novellas better than I do. It has to do with when Sir Stephen Fossaway agrees to fight on Sir Duncan's behalf in the trial of seven, and he says, "Yeah, I'm with you." And then he turns cloak on the morning of the trial, and I'm unclear, and I don't remember if the books gave more explication as to whether he actually meant that or he was bullshitting him all along and trying to ensure that he didn't have enough people turn up and was going to be guilty by default.
Tiny bit more exposition in the books. When he agreed to fight for him, he left that location and went back to his tent where one of his uncles was waiting for him. And his uncle walks in and was like, look, the prince is going to choose you as one of the fighters, and you're going to have to be there to do it. And he's like, I just told Duncan the Tall that I'd fight for him because the prince is a prick. He's like, the prince is going to bestow a title upon you and vasty fortunes of land. You're going to fight for the prince. And if you don't, you're going to be passed over for the crown of what is it, Hightower or I can't remember where he's from. But anyway, yeah,
Fossaway. He's from I forget what their seat is. I'll look it up. Keep talking.
Anyway, he's the direct in line. And if you don't do this, you're not going to be direct in line. And we'll stick the younger brother who's currently shacked up over there with Duncan and Egg, and the uncle doesn't know this. Right? He's already tied up over there. And this is, in my opinion, at least from the perspective of the way it was described in the story, this is a byproduct of the younger sibling already having an in with Egg. The uncle shows up and is like, hey, dude, your brother's already in that one. You need to be on the other side. I'm not going to do that. It would be dishonorable. You're going to be fucking king one day, and you're going to need to buckle down and do the right thing. And this is the right thing to do for the family, which leaves him sitting there going, shit. He's like, let me go tell him. No, you don't tell him. You tell him tomorrow when you enter the list, because that will leave him one short for the trial and he'll have to beseech to the crowd. And we've already got that bought. So,
yeah. All right. I've got the lowdown on House Fossaway. They are from the Reach. So they're close to their home turf here where we are in Ashford Meadow. And they are bannermen for House Tyrell.
And that's Highgarden, right?
Yep.
All right. So you're talking about the same family that produced an individual referred to as the Knight of Flowers.
Indeed.
And that man,
House Tyrell does not have the most masculine heraldry in the Seven Kingdoms.
Not only that, they don't have the most masculine people, but this is one of those examples where you might want to be real careful messing around over there. They do have some of the best swordsmen in the Seven Kingdom, and absolutely
they do produce good-looking women. I'll give them that.
Yes, sir. Never a miss.
Love me
Maybe
some
in
Natalie
this-
Dormer.
Yeah. Ooh, good God, girl, the most paused scene in all of Game of Thrones history.
For good reason.
Right. Anyway, so
Yeah. If we were still in the VHS days, that would be where the tape always breaks from people pausing it.
damn right it would. I'd be fixing that shit twice a week, and you know it. So, the opening scene, very first scene in the show, you see this. Now, if I sat down and wrote out an exposition for this scene, it would look like a funeral dirge sounds. This is obviously a scene of depression, of death, of sorrow and mourning, right? He's doing a thing in weather that is already bad. Anyone worth their salt would be inside and under roof, and he's not. He's out digging a hole. There's only one reason someone digs a hole in a storm, and that's to bury a body. And so without ever saying a word, they tell you this is a very, very lonely funeral. And very lonely funerals only take place under two conditions. One, you died unexpectedly in a strange land. And two, somebody just murdered your ass.
And the first words we hear from our main character are, "I don't know the right words," which is such a great snapshot encapsulation of the character. And that was a good narrative choice, I think.
Right. He is not educated in words or books. He knows some stories and almost no history. He knows just enough Targaryen lore to get his ass in trouble and not enough to protect himself.
Literally every single thing he knows about the world was taught to him by his master, and that is it.
Yes. With a few exceptions. There are some like the difference between ghetto smarts and book smarts. This man can walk through Flea Bottom completely unnoticed. He will wander through the lower echelons of every city, town, and burg without ever making a ripple. But at the same time, the second he steps into that realm of knighthood, it makes a really big splash without meaning.
Yeah, and that the thing you mentioned gets alluded to when Lionel Baratheon asks him, "Why the hell do you slouch when you're such a tall son of a bitch?"
There's a reason for that. In the books, it explains that his master was a good deal shorter than him and wanted to cuff him in the head, right? You're supposed to cuff your squire in the back of the head, but he couldn't reach the back of his head. And so he made him slouch down to get hit. And he spent so much time getting cuffed for doing stuff wrong, for being a dumbass, that he just developed that permanent slouch.
And it only occurs to me right now that when he makes his big dramatic appeal for someone else to join his party right before the trial of the Seven at the end of the most recent episode, it's really the first time that we hear him speak eloquently without sort of stuttering and stammering and falling all over his own words. And that's, it's kind of a real threshold that he has crossed there. Kind of you might call it the moment when he becomes a real knight.
There's also an unwritten, deep trauma in this man's speech. He doesn't really stutter, but he does stutter occasionally. He doesn't speak softly intentionally, but he does so out of deference to everyone around him. He's the colloquial bull in a china shop when it comes to that kind of stuff. But here's the thing. His master spent his entire life telling him he's dumb. He should keep his mouth shut. You have nothing useful to say. What can you teach anyone? Blah, 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 blah. That's the trauma you see walking in as, quote unquote, a man in his own right and having to deal with all of his own shit instead of having his master do all of this for him. When he arrives, it's just provided for because they know him. They don't know Duncan, right? So when he shows up, he has to have all the conversations. He has to have all the first meetings, and all of that becomes a very, very significant growing period for him that you witness on screen over the course of, like, when he meets the Laughing Storm and Homeboy walks up to him. And in the book, the Laughing Storm has his Baratheon crown on with the antlers, and it almost pokes Duncan in the eye because he refuses to look up to him. He walks up and he stops, and then he backs back up and gets up on top of the table and squats down and looks at him eye to eye. That's how they have that conversation.
I recall in some of the behind the scenes things that I was watching this morning in preparation, that the showrunner said that in the other two previous series, Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, they have kind of assiduously avoided showing things in flashback because they thought that was, narrative shortcut type of storytelling. And I'm glad to see them doing more of that in this and not necessarily being guided by the same things that guided the previous showrunners. And you know why? Is because I want to see more of Sir Arlen, because I like that actor and I like the character. And I don't care that he's dead already. I want to see more of him in flashback. And I think that will help us, gain a better understanding of how Duncan became the man he is.
Another thing to be noted, Duncan comes from such unbelievably humble beginnings that most people who meet him have no doubt that he's a knight, because he embodies that's the only thing that he actually is, right? He's never trained to be a brewer, a baker. He can't cook to save his freaking life. He's not very good with horses. He's good enough. He's the only thing he's really truly good at is breaking shit.
Yeah, the only life skills he knows are the skills of a squire and a knight from living his whole life around a knight of the realm.
Exactly. And I have one concern, and when I wrap this up, we're gonna check out the trailer. But there's a scene when they're going into the trial of the seven, and he has to go and do a speech and talk to the houses to provide a knight. He needs one knight. The Laughing Storm is knighting the other guy over here off camera, and he's talking to the people there about what it means to be a knight, and is there not a single true knight left in all of the houses of the Seven Kingdom, that no one would stand with a man who defended the innocent? How dare you, sirs? Right? He's doing that whole thing.
And the Bracken guy stands up and cuts a fart.
Right. So during that whole thing, this like back and forth, it's part of all of this. The homeboy's over there being fucking knighted, and Duncan is remembering his knighting. But do you remember the scene when Duncan's flashing back to himself being knighted? There is no sword.
We just get a little smirk and a shrug.
Yeah, and there is no sword in that scene.
No. And I like the way they are leaving that all ambiguous, because the book leaves it ambiguous as well. We never really get a definitive answer to whether he was actually knighted or not.
I have a theory, and this does not come from the series, but comes from the books. This is something that I came up with reading those. And I think they do a nod to the theory in the show. Do you remember the scene where his master is standing naked in the doorway?
It's hard to forget.
Yeah, it is, because that man's swinging a fucking major league bat.
He's waving his big swinging knighthood all over the place.
Damn right. Okay, so the theory goes that Sir Duncan was not knighted by a blade, but was knighted by his weapon. And that's why you get the weird smirk and shrug, and that's why you get to see that man's knighthood, if you will.
Yeah,
ladies, hold on, ladies. If you have not watched this, there is a scary one-eyed monster in this thing that made me flinch twice and say, "Oh my!"
And there was a lot of technical discussion in that behind the scenes featurette about the technical details of how they achieved the prosthetic knighthood.
Dear God, I hope it's prosthetic. Because not, I hope that man's not married, because that is
but they were very pleased with themselves that they managed to make it look so convincing and make fake pee come out of it. Just
homeboy's like 5'3". Homeboy's like 5'3", and he's got to tape it down. You imagine catching a hard on halfway through a battle with that shit? You got a cod piece on. What the fuck does he do, man?
Yeah, pitching a tent right in the middle of the battlefield.
No, you can't. Cod piece, bro.
You're right. Yeah.
If that man don't lay, low and to the right, it's going to be very uncomfortable.
God, that'll give you a bruise.
Right.
Jesus.
But anyway, we're going to let it rock. With or without music?
With.
I've
Music in this
acquired
is very good.
surrounding any tree since I was a boy.
They charged me to be a good knight, to defend the weak and the innocent.
And I swore that I would.
Are you Baelor Targaryen?
No.
Then would you move the fuck out of the way?
Sorry.
What's your name?
Hold on, that scene right there is utterly glorious. He steps up and the dude doesn't move. He's waiting for the guy to move, right? And the guy's waiting for him to move.
Yeah,
He's
and
like,
that's
Baelor Targaryen. Then get the fuck out of the way, dude.
that's something that I'm eager to get your thoughts on after we get through with the trailer, is the use of bathos that there is in this series and how we feel about it, because it is such an incredibly overused trope in the last 10 years or so, but we have never seen it in this particular franchise, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about it yet.
All right.
Sir Duncan the Tall.
Never heard of him.
Do you know every knight in the Seven Kingdoms then?
The good ones. If you
It is at that moment that he looks at that kid and goes, well, there's only one way that's possible. How's that
and
possible?
there's a dead giveaway right off the bat, because the kid doesn't say my lord, he says my lord. And as we learned in the conversation between Tywin Lannister and Arya Stark way back in season 4 of Game of Thrones, that's how you can tell a highborn kid from a lowborn kid. The one says my lord and the one says my lord.
Exactly. Oh, Lord. I'm ruining everything. I apologize.
could bring
Oh,
me
my
to
lord.
Ashes, I could swipe you, sir.
Rob me, and I'll hunt you down with dogs.
You don't have dogs!
I'll get some.
Where?
Oh!
Boys, stop gaping. Sit my horse.
I'm not a stable boy, my lord.
Not clever enough.
I know I'm just a hedge knight, but
There is a lot of that type of stuff in this show where people are just offhandedly and backhandedly complimentary, but very cutting with their wit.
It is a much wittier show than either of the other shows have been.
more.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
It's a much wittier show than either of the previous 2 shows have been.
Facts. Absolutely. Oh, God. House of the Dragon was terrible. They tried to use political wit, which I'm not even sure is a thing. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
to the
we'll get to House of the Dragon, I'm sure.
please, God, no.
Why do you treat these royal lapdogs like they're your betters?
They are my betters.
These men have a name. I'm trading. What chance do I have?
I have no chance.
Falling star brings luck to those who see it.
So the luck is ours alone? I need to fight honorably. But sometimes I think I buried my courage alongside the old man.
And in every man, there are many men. So be brave. Be just. Be tall.
I really like that line, within every man there are many men. That's my favorite line in the series so far.
I actually intended to open with the line, if you cut a man's tongue out, you do not prove him a liar. You prove you are afraid of what he might say.
Boom.
It's, dude, that should have been said by someone famous in history, and instead it was written in some crappy dime store novel. It's great.
Hey,
It's
somebody's
great.
got to write this stuff.
Right? Oh my God. It's such a great quote.
It doesn't matter where the axiom comes from, just that it's good and useful.
I'm sneezing to death over here. Uh-oh, I screwed up. I'll fix it.
Look at that thumbnail, ladies and gentlemen.
That's beautiful, bro. Although, we got it. I got it mixed up again. I don't know how that keeps happening. Boom. Hey, on the vertical, it looks like we're actually our heads.
And I actually zoomed it in a little bit for the just so our faces were more prominent. But in the full size shot, make no mistake, the corpses of our vanquished enemies are lying all around on the ground. But I think I've killed more than he did.
I mean, you missed the two. It's okay. I covered it. I got it. You're good.
That's why I don't have my sword on me, because I left it sticking out of some poor bastard.
Those bastards. All right, so this is a 14-minute long Drinkers Chasers. But before we do that, let's do the thing with the. We're gonna go back and take a look at the different scenes here. One thing I want to just glow about, and I want to absolutely freak out about, the costumes in this show are so absolutely great.
The armor, especially.
Yeah, armor, especially, yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, just when
there's not one single set of armor in this thing that doesn't look absolutely freaking fantastic. And
right,
those guys just hit it absolutely out of the park. And they've got a big legacy to live up to, because the armor always looks great in these shows. But my God, did they do a great job here? It just and everybody's armor, just the Baratheon guy's armor and the Fossaway guy's armor. How can you make Apple armor look cool? I don't know, but they did. It should be impossible, but they pulled it off.
That Fossaway dude is an absolute freaking monster. He is a beast, bro. And they show a little bit of it in the show, but when Duncan is coming to the lists and he sees Fossaway, he recognizes him not because he's seen him before, but because that man is legendary as a fearsome fighter.
Yep. And now he's playing for the other guys.
Right. But even beyond the armor, you'd expect them to pay attention to the armor, a special attention to the armor, right? When he's going out into like the freaking inns and whatnot, or he's out talking to the chicks and the hookers and the whores, there's not a single thread out of place. Nothing there looks like it shouldn't be there. It all fits, and it all just flows smoothly. And they do not tell. They don't give you a big long explanation and exposition. They show him going to every night and going, "Hey, do you remember Pennytree? We served your father at this battle." No, I don't.
And I want to mention also, while we're still talking about the armor, the another thing I saw during the behind the scenes featurette, just the amount of detail they put into all this stuff. Where they were talking about when Prince Baelor comes out to suddenly join Duncan's side, as the big, crux of the most recent episode. They said, we made Baelor's armor slightly small because Baelor was not planning to enter the tournament as a knight in competition. So he actually borrowed his second son's armor in order to wear in the Trial of Seven, and that's why it is slightly too small, and he struggles a little bit when he pulls off his helm. And that attention to detail just absolutely astounds me, and I applaud it.
Oh, and one more thing I want to make a point of. Their choices of women in these shows, oh my God, dude. That is they hit
it out of the park with the casting all the way around.
And there's nowhere in the casting that I don't like the person they picked. The dude that does all of the nasal snorting, spitting, nasty shit.
Yeah.
Flawless.
Even just the 13-year-old girl whose name day they are having the tournament to celebrate, she has only got 2 or 3 lines in the whole thing, and she is absolutely perfect. Just totally nails it. It's amazing.
There's a good scene right there. When I say no one knows exactly how tall Duncan is, this man here is large. This man here is also large. This chick, dude, whatever this is, this might be your average height in Westeros. When they say head and shoulders above, remember what I said about the scene where he meets Baratheon, the Laughing Storm, and he walks up and pokes him in the eye with his fucking antler, and then backs up and climbs up on like a chair or table or some shit so he could look him eye to eye. And this motherfucker's like 6'4". He's a big boy. And he's like, wait a minute, this isn't gonna work. He's already drunk and giggling maniacally. He's like, pokes him in the stomach, backs up, and then gets up on something and is like, listen, why are you slouching? Be tall, motherfucker. This guy, he's terrible, but he's great. He's great at being terrible, and I love it.
No perfect casting again.
Yes. That dude, Jesus Christ, he is a fucking beast, bro. And I want to point out right there, he's fighting with his squire at that moment.
Yep.
Think about how many ass whoopings that squire has taken. Right? He's towed him home, packed him up in his freaking lunch for the next day. Got it happen again. So when he meets another individual that was not trained in the way he's been trained, oh, it's going to be a pushover, bro. Those kings.
But at the same time, we probably don't know what Raymond Fossaway's full abilities are, because if he actually fights at his full capabilities and embarrasses his cousin, whose squire he is, that's going to get him in a whole shitload of trouble. So it would seem like he probably has to hold back a little bit to some extent. And then during the Trial of Seven that's coming up, we might see his full capacity.
God, I hope he goes all John Wick, dude. I hope it ends up being him and his fucking cousin fighting head to head.
Yeah,
right?
I think I have a suspicion that he's going to acquit himself very well.
And they're gonna be basically a match set, and folks are just gonna stand there and watch this out, because it would be like Achilles fighting one of the Greek gods, bro. Like, they've trained against each other constantly for years. And difference is that the younger one has never actually nutted up and took a swing. And when he gets the rage that has to be built up in that man.
We go back to that saying, I forget who said it, but I taught him everything he knows, but not everything I know.
But that might be true, and it might not be true.
Yeah.
Right. Being able to take an ass whooping right across the nose is half of winning a fight.
Absolutely.
Maybe even the greater part of winning a fight. And there are lots of like background omens that are shown. There's the witch that does the prediction. There's the shooting star. There's the fact that the puppetress, the one that paints his sigil, listens to what he says and then doesn't do that at all. I mean, kinda, but she's like, oh, you have terrible taste, and does something gorgeous instead of something like the rest of the knights have, which is, you know, a herald or some sort of coat of arms on their shield or whatever. And it's all,
and it's actually the kid who makes a couple of the design suggestions.
Yeah, but they're good is the thing. She recognizes it, looks at Duncan and goes, you have no taste, sir. You know?
Well, that's one of the things we have learned about Duncan, is that as inarticulate as he normally is with anybody, he is especially inarticulate when he's trying to talk to a pretty woman. And I think a lot of men can identify with that.
Aren't we all?
Yep.
I mean, I don't know what to say.
Some of us more than others.
Oh, one more thing about the way this was done. The only dragon depicted in this entire show is a puppet. And it's a puppet that breathes fire inside of a tent that are run by people. And it is a brilliant piece of artistry.
Oh, I know. It's absolutely accurate for the way that sort of thing would have been done in the medieval era. And all the care and attention that had to have been put into that is another thing that you just have to applaud.
That's a hell of a scene right there, bro.
And yeah, we have to have puppet dragons now because all the real dragons are freaking dead.
Right?
And the Targaryens are bothered about it.
They're bothered. Look at this. Look at this freaking armor, bro.
Yep.
That is absolutely diabolical. Imagine coming across a battlefield. You've killed 17 people. You turn around and you see this cocksucker slicing some bitches up, walking towards you. What do?
And you get a real sense of the family-wide inferiority complex that they are all suffering from now. We don't have our dragons anymore. You know, our grandparents killed all the fucking dragons when they were having that civil war with each other. So now we have to cosplay as dragons since we can't ride real ones.
And chainmail will not stop a bullet. Just saying. But look at his armor. I mean, it's all just every single rivet, every stitch, everything. The horse's armor is absolutely immaculate. He's even got antlers on the ass of his horse. That's hilarious.
Duncan is the only one on the field out of the 14 who doesn't have full plate. He's just got some greaves and some spandrels.
I mean, he can't even wear the cuirass, can he?
No, he's just got a chainmail shirt protecting his torso.
But he does have a really, really good shield, and a sword and board's hard to beat when you're fighting somebody.
And it was cool how the armorer guy fixed up his shield for him and only charged him a penny. That was pretty badass.
Yeah. Well, he liked the girl too. And this man is going to die defending a finger.
Well, and Duncan is finding out, and I think it's to his surprise, just how much resentment there is against the Targaryens among so many people. They don't always say it out loud, but if you get them alone, they'll say, "Oh, fuck. The best thing a Targaryen can do is finish on his wife's tits." I do like that line too.
Absolutely. Oh, and there's another thing here. When Homeboy does his tilt, he kills the horse. He swerves the lance the first time and kills the horse the second time.
Yep.
This is extremely, extremely belittling to the knight he's fighting, because part of the reason why they do this is to get the horse and the armor, and then you pay to get it back, and it's ransom. Right.
Yeah.
He kills the horse and does not allow him to break a lance.
It's effectively a means of humiliation combined with extortion.
Exactly. That dude is a great laughing storm, though. That is
absolutely.
I might not have cast him if I was asked, but had he showed up and been like, "Hey, I want to be the laughing storm," I'd have been like, "Fuck yeah, you do."
Is it just me, or does that guy look exactly like the bastard love child of George Clooney and Oscar Isaac?
You might have a point there, bro.
I guess it's not just me.
All right. We're gonna check in to see what Mr. Drinker has to say about it at this point. What do you think?
I guess my vote.
Okay.
Go in there.
A guy going on an adventure, a well-defined quest, likable characters. Our main guy is, he's a well-meaning chap, not the brightest guy in the room, but a well-meaning dude who will fight for what's right. And it just feels great. It feels like such a refreshing change when it comes to fantasy shows these days. Yeah, it's like, wow, you could actually just tell an honest story.
I watched it last night for today, and it's simple and great.
Exactly. There's no extra parts. There's no political narrative. There's no stop being white, stop being English, stop being, none of that.
There is absolutely no evidence of the woke mind virus anywhere. And my God, how refreshing is that?
Well, all right. So what little bit might be there could be just me assuming they can't make anything without it. If you'll remember, there's a tidbit with the ladies of ill repute where he comes in. You look at this guy, and he's, I mean, maybe not obviously a knight, but surely he is carrying a sword and wearing greaves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, why he doesn't have his full armor on is anybody's guess, but you don't get a sword and armor without either killing a knight and taking it, or stealing enough money to get it. So when he shows up and he starts talking to the women, and they just kind of fluff him right off the top, just like, nah, hard pass. You don't know what you're talking about. They just,
Oh, that's a good panel. They got Drinker and Mauler and Robot Head.
right. They just pawn him off immediately, and he respectfully is like, well, thank you, madam. I'll look elsewhere, and goes to leave. And they realize, wait a second, hold on. This isn't your usual knight. This is obviously a boy who has just been knighted. And okay, hold on. Come here, kid. Listen, you're going to run into a lot of this kind of stuff around here. And it's
Like
not
a knight, but sadder.
Yeah, like a knight, but sadder. I'm sorry, you got me. I forgot about that line. My point is, he's so affable and so courteous that even when people belittle him, they immediately regret it, because it obviously hurts his feelings. And he kind of sads up and he slouches a little bit and walks away. He's like, I'm sorry, sir.
Well, yeah, and as I mentioned to you backstage before the show started, it was an incredibly courageous bit of casting to make the two series leads a couple of actors with basically no acting experience. I know you don't have much of a choice with the little kid, but for the guy playing Duncan, that's a bold move. That guy was a rugby player a couple of years ago.
Well, what do you do?
Yeah.
Who do you cast for this role? I've heard a lot of names thrown around. All of them are too old. I mean, Duncan was barely 19.
Yeah, I mean, even the guy they cast is too old based on the books, but
right.
Duncan
Duncan was actually too old to be a squire at the point in time that homeboy died. He only kept him around because he knew he was dying.
And you've got a little bit of wiggle room there, because he's not entirely certain how old he is at all, because he never knew his parents and has no way of knowing, and he's freakishly large for his age, and that makes it even more difficult to know exactly how old he is. So he's just kind of guessing anyway.
Well, I guess that's what I meant to say, is he was too large to be a squire. He should have been knighted or fired at some point. But he had been, because he was a knight. He's obviously the right stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. Cast. Everyone can act. And
yes,
it's fun. Like
and they know how to build the payoff.
Yeah,
they know how to build it up and pay it off.
Yeah, it was just a relief to watch, because I've been watching Star Trek, obviously, Starfleet Academy, and as you said, you were saying going to talk about this. I thought I should
of time, and they're delving into classic mythological storytelling we recognize these characters, and yet it's still surprising. And it takes fantasy and humanizes it and makes it very recognizable to us. We understand the motivations of these characters. We like these characters. We can't wait to go along with them on this journey. And
I want to compare that to The Acolyte. when you lay these two side by side, or I'll even go with one of my favorite recent Disney productions, Skeleton Crew. When you lay these two productions side by side, yes, there is obvious mythological influence from in this series. You can see it. The sort of, I mean, hell, even the Battle of the Seven kind of looks like a Kurosawa thing.
Sure. It's hard to find things that don't have any Kurosawa influence.
I mean, good God, man, you're not wrong, but there's a reason for it.
Yep.
I don't know. It's so refreshing to see something that's not being actively shoved down our throats,
Well, and as you know, as we've talked about before, I always thought that Game of Thrones was at its best, the show, I mean, when it remained firmly grounded in reality, when it was basically an alternate history of medieval Europe. I thought it was at its best. And when pretty much every character and event in the show, when they remain grounded in reality, has a particular antecedent or inspiration from actual medieval European history. Even the freaking Red Wedding. The Red Wedding happened in Scotland in 1300, and I forget the year exactly, but that was a real freaking thing.
It's really, the word I keep using, I keep coming back to, is refreshing. It is very nice to be excited. I told you this before. I have not been this excited for the next episode since The Expanse.
I think, and some people might think this is an outlandish statement I'm about to make. I think episode 4 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is the best episode in this franchise in over 10 years, probably since season 6 of the original show.
Mm-hmm.
Better than anything in either season of House of the Dragon.
And well, I don't even really want to discuss House of the Dragon in the same breath with this or the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones. I mean, they basically took all of their budget and blew it trying to make dragons, and then got one really hot chick to put out front and let the rest of it flap in the wind, and it just does not work.
Well, yeah, and they took pretty serious liberties with the source material that you can categorize as being woke mind virus, in terms of they made it a very gynocentric narrative. They elevated the importance of Alicent Hightower far, far beyond any importance that she actually had in the source material. She was just King Viserys' second wife. She didn't have much importance beyond that. And as we know, there was a bit of racial stunt casting, which when they made the Velaryon family, they race swapped them. But that was actually a bit of racial stunt casting that I kind of gave a half-hearted defense to, because that was a rare case where the racial stunt casting actually introduced an interesting new layer into the narrative. Right. Because now these bastard kids are supposed to be quarter black, and they're very, very clearly not quarter black. So it's even more obvious that they're bastards.
The in the stories, in the lore of that is the other family of Valerians that survived before all of the, what was it, the
Doom,
right? Yeah. These were not true blood Valerians like the Targaryens were, that were able to get on their dragons and escape. These were some like you said, bastard children of some other Valerian family that happened to be on freaking vacation when that shit happened or whatever, right? They just happened to also be Valerian. And so when the Targaryens took Westeros, these other Valerians showed up and was like, "Hi, cousin, how are you doing? Hello, fellow hipsters." And they were like, "I don't know, man."
Yeah, I mean, they were also an old school Valyrian house, but not every Valyrian house were dragon riders, and so they have the Targaryens respect them for being from the old hood, but we're dragon riders and you're not, so obviously you are our inferiors, and that's kind of it. Out of that inferiority complex came the Velaryons becoming big sea captain naval types.
Right.
We can't compete with them. We can't compete with them on the dragon thing, so let's be really good at Navy stuff.
Well, there's a little more to it than that. When you get into the lore of the Valyrian homeland, all of the major families had specializations that were beyond superhuman. The Targaryens rode dragons. Other families did other things. Some practiced death magic, some practiced dream walking, some saw the future, and all of them were so obscenely powerful as to balance the tables against a group of warriors that fly around on fucking flame-breathing lizards. Think that through for a second. Whatever it was.
And we still don't really have a clear explanation for why some Valyrian families became dragon riders and some did not. Maybe we'll get that at some point in the future.
I kind of don't want that. I don't want them to touch that level of origin. I think that would be.
Well, I wonder if they will touch it in the series about Aegon's conquest that's currently in production, and I think coming out next year.
There's certain implications. What's up, bro? There's certain implications in the original Game of Thrones series, specifically Daenerys. She seems to have entire mental conversations with those dragons. They're not just big lizard animals. They are as much a part of her as her own feet, right?
Yeah.
And you don't get exactly the same feel when you run into these other Valerians and their dragons, right? These other ones, it's like they're a mount. They're a very dedicated mount, but nothing more than a mount, a friend for life. So something like that. When a dragon rider dies, often the dragon dies afterwards. And sometimes, very rarely, the dragon will take on a new rider if they're part of the same family and, in the dragon's opinion, honorable.
Right. And yet, and confusingly, we also have certain cases, and I'm talking specifically of Rhaenyra's sons. They become dragon riders, even though they are half non-Valyrian, but they still manage it. So,
and that implies there is a much wider range of people who could possibly do what the Targaryens do. It's the access to dragons that make them such rare things, being dragon riders.
Right. And then in turn, does their whole idea of exclusivity and the elevated power that comes along with it just arise as a function of restricting other people's access to the dragons? As it very well might, it seems.
Right. Well, I mean, you see what one dragon does when they end up doing the fight. I think it's season 5, and they go for the reach. And the chubby guy's whole family gets fucked because they were on the wrong side of fighting a dragon.
Oh yeah, the Tarleys.
Tarleys, thank you. Jesus, I was going, it's not Targaryen, it's the guy with the sword, but hell, they all have swords. It's the guy with the special sword.
I like the Tarley dad. He was a badass. He didn't like no damn wildlings, man. Get that fucking wildling out of my house right now.
Right. Racism is strong in the Reach, bro.
Westerosi right. Cracker on cracker racism right there.
That's beautiful. And that's another point I want to point out. When they were casting for the original Game of Thrones series, this is another case of where they really hit it out of the park when they were casting the wildlings, how diverse and weird all of their different tribes were. Is beautiful. When you look at this, you see a certain uniformity to all of the people. They're not all exactly white, right?
Right.
But they're all various shades of like peanut butter.
and many of the women are quite attractive, but none of them are what you would call unambiguously beautiful.
I don't know, man. That one puppetress dude, she is an absolute hammer. That
no, I mean from the original show.
You know nothing, Jon Snow. There's your hammer.
I'm not saying she's unattractive, but she's not a classic beauty, is all I'm saying.
I think you're worried about procreating more soulless gingers. That's your problem. Don't lie to me. That she's at least a Tampa 10, bro.
I'm not going to say anything about her unimpressive rack.
Yeah, okay. Hey, can't have everything, but
can't have everything.
LA, she can.
Indeed.
Right.
And didn't the two of them get married in real life?
I hope so. Dear God, they'd make some beautiful babies. I hope they have 27 daughters.
Don't mess with the ginger supremacy.
Yeah, well, we're just going to let that hang out for a while over here.
I'm kissed by fire.
So have you come across any other shows, movies, anything else that's worth spending your time on?
I have not, but can we spend a moment on the bathos? Because I wanted to get to that.
Okay, let's do that thing. Yeah.
As I said, it hasn't been a very big feature of either of the previous shows in this franchise. The current new series relies very heavily on it, and the reason I'm not sure how I feel about it is because it has become such an incredibly tired trope in various other properties over the last, let's say, 10 or 15 years or more. In particular, the Marvel movies have lost all ability to take themselves seriously, because each time they start building up to some big dramatic moment, it has to be undercut with some silly bit of sophomoric humor, and it happens every single time now. It's also infected Star Wars, and I can't decide whether I am judging the usage of that trope in this new series fairly based upon, because I have become prejudiced toward it just because of what an overused trope it has become in other franchises. Because as we know, it's been well established in this new series through 4 episodes that each time we are building and swelling up toward a big dramatic moment, then there is a poop joke or a fart joke. And I'm not quite sure how I feel about it.
Well, okay, let's look at this as a weapon or a tool. Bathos is utilized to trivialize some major event to break the tension. The problem with the other shows is they never establish the tension in the first place, right? And so the bathos is implied but never actually utilized. In this show, I think they're utilizing it properly, even if they might be overusing it a little. But I think
at the very least they do a better job of earning it.
Yeah,
and it's not just a sort of a reflex action.
They're not just telling you that there is tension. They are showing you the tension in the scene, in the acting, in the smoke, in the fog, and that asshole standing at the door waiting for him to move. Bitch, I got a horse. I can't go around you.
And also the all of those usages of bathos in the previous episode, and even the same episode, even the big fart joke just a couple of minutes previous, it makes it a bigger sort of dramatically orgasmic moment when Prince Baelor rides in, and then we get the full playing of the Game of Thrones theme for the first time in the entire series. And maybe the bathos was required in order to earn the powerfulness of that moment.
Perhaps. I think the tension was necessary. And you make a good point. When it comes to Star Wars, it comes to Marvel. As soon as Marvel introduced multiple timelines, all of the tension and the consequences of the plot are gone. If you kill somebody, you can just get another version of them from another universe and plug and play them.
Just go grab another copy. It'll be fine. Yeah.
And Game of Thrones has not suffered that depredation, but at the same time, they are apparently were under the yoke of the woke mind virus for a short period. That entire freaking, oh my God, the House of the Dragon, it was just as bad. It was almost a carbon copy of the Lord of the Rings travesty they did. Can't even remember the name.
And I would submit that also that the quality of the new show makes House of the Dragon suffer even more by comparison.
Right. I mean, House of the Dragon tried to be amazing dragon riders doing amazing dragon rider things, and they failed horribly due to basically blowing their budget on special effects and having to do everything else as a byproduct of that in special effects. So rather than having sets, they have green screens. Rather than having a well-formed plan on how things are going to happen, they have a plotted walking path through an empty room, and it shows. Whereas in this guy's walking around with a horse talking to people, and horses don't always do what you want them to. Sometimes they just poop.
Yeah. And we know that everything we see is actually real, and that makes a difference. it makes a you can never be as convincing in a big green room pretending to interact with people and things that are not there as you can be in a real environment where you can look all around you and see real people and real things, and that makes a big difference in terms of narrative storytelling. And now it's time when I do the thing I do at the end of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks ever so much for joining us tonight. You made a good choice, and you do again get intellectual bonus points for being with us instead of watching the silly sports ball game. Who won? I don't know. Is it still going on? I don't know. Do I care? I do not. We will see you next week, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, Sunday night. As we always do, I will have another vaguely subversive, very, very long monologue for you because I know you love doing that as much as I do. And have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow and an edifying rest of your week. See you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.